Audi RS6 is an institution. For years it has been almost without opposition. That combination of a twin turbocharged engine, all-wheel drive and a luxurious interior has made it the go-to car for petrol heads who need some practicality in their life. But things are changing. Mercedes E-Class AMG now also has a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8 and all-wheel drive. On the other side of things, you've also got competition from the growing collection of very fast, large SUVs, things like Audi's own RS8 and perennial favourites like the Range Rover Sport SVR. The RS6 is actually a car that I've very rarely been in love with. The C5 generation had an amazing twin-turbo engine and was a tuner favourite, but hampered by a chocolate gearbox and looks that have really dated quite badly now. The C6 had that incredible wild twin-turbo V10, but it weighed the same as a small moon. But the C7 generation was utterly brilliant. I drove one a little while ago on the channel and completely fell for its charms. So when Audi phoned me and said, would I like to test the new generation car, I leapt at the chance. There is just one tiny problem though. The official launch that we've been invited to is taking place in Germany. And we are in Britain. And that means only one thing: road trip! Now, before we begin proper, there are a few people that I need to thank. First off, Audi UK for being so kind as to invite me out here. Secondly, my evergreen co-pilot James Dean, currently having a quick nap in the passenger seat. And lastly, but not leastly, BOTB. Yes, those guys again. And that's particularly relevant because they have recently added to their list of 150 different cars that you can win one of these. And not to put too fine a point on it, but their sponsorship means that videos like this are possible. So please do give them a look. You have to be 16 or over to play. The competition is worldwide. It's a spot the ball competition that you play, and you can win a £93,000 RS6 for £4.45, which seems like a bit of a bargain. Anyway, on to the task at hand. Now, I thought I was going to be a bit clever with this one. Press launches are an interesting thing, you see. They're often a great experience, but for us YouTubers, they're not often the best way to create content because you have an awful lot of things to do in a very small time scale, and you don't really have the luxury of being able to choose where and when you do things. That means when you're on unfamiliar roads in an unfamiliar car, it can often be difficult to try and get the best out of it and give an honest appraisal of the product you've been sent out to test. Now, Audi UK were very kind to me and a few others, and they allowed us to get these cars delivered to our home addresses and drive them out to the event. In my case, 2 days before the event actually began. I thought I was being very sneaky and very clever, you see, because I thought, you know what? I'm not going to drive on the roads they want me to drive on. I'm going to drive on the roads I want to drive on. It is at this point in time, I must admit, that I made a bit of a mistake. This is not exactly the high-octane experience that I'd hope from an RS6 launch. Fortunately for you all, I have had enough experience with the car before this to still be able to give you a relatively honest appraisal, and I will be asking Audi at the earliest possible convenience to lend me one of these to play with on my own familiar back roads. But what have we done? Well, we have driven so far about 600 miles, all the way from my home in the heart of East Anglia out to here, the middle of the Black Forest in Germany, where it is ruddy cold, specifically -0.5 degrees. It is also, as you can see, very snowy. Fortunately, and in keeping with German rules, this car has currently got winter tyres on it. But yeah, you're going to have to rely on some extra footage that I'm going to splice in to give you an idea of the car's dynamics. But fortunately, I have experienced them myself, so I can at least explain them. So the new RS6, it's quite a departure in terms of styling from the old car, which in certain specifications was a real true Q car. This one, not so much, and I can confirm this gets an awful lot of admiring looks and glances. We've been very, very surprised. When you sit inside it, if you've been in any recent Audi, it is a very familiar place to be. You've got the virtual cockpit up front, although that does seem a touch smaller than what I expected. This particular one is a launch edition car, so it's £101,700 on the road and comes with a few optional extras bundled in as standard on top of the regular car. Now, the most obvious thing is the massive 22-inch wheels, which you'd think would give this car a completely unbearable ride. Somehow it doesn't at all, and this is actually a very comfy car and an excellent autobahn cruiser. You also get the raised speed limiter, 280 kilometers an hour, about 174 mile an hour, and we have hit that. Over about 150 on the autobahn, the car gets a little bit floaty, a little bit interesting. Not sure if that's a combination of the weather, the tyres or whatever, but it's not the most reassuring car to drive at those kind of speeds. However, up to about 140 or so, it's fine, and it really does get there with quite some urgency. Unfortunately, in keeping with all modern cars now, it's got a very muted exhaust. You get a sportier one, again, as part of this pack, along with some black trim and finishers, and this very nice sunroof. However, the overall spec on this car is a real mixed bag, and I'm just not sure what Audi were thinking. Some criticisms of other Audi products I've driven recently are also valid here. For example, there's just not enough leather in it. Too much of this kind of fake leatherish. Like, it's nice enough, but not nice enough for 100 grand in my opinion. You've got double glazed doors, but without soft close, and the soft close in this would really make a difference. You've got this nice, clear, high-resolution display down here, but using the sat-nav for the drive out was not easy at all. It's not very intuitive, doesn't give you the nice, clear displays showing you which lane of an exit you need to take, all that jazz. It's just not the best system I have ever used. Still don't like the screen that they have down here, which is supposed to be for all your climate control and all that stuff. Having to take your eye off the road to adjust basic things like temperature in the cabin just shouldn't ever happen. Fortunately, the beer and sausage holder works perfectly. You've also got these small little paddles which operate the 8-speed Tiptronic gearbox here. Again, for an RS product, I just don't think they're good enough. But there are some good things as well. There's lots of this carbon-ish looking material in here. Plenty of space, loads of legroom in the back for passengers, plenty of boot space. This one originally came to us with roof bars fitted for reasons unknown to us. We took those off pretty quickly because they make a horrendous racket when you're driving at more than about 50 mile an hour, and we would have gone spare if we'd driven all the way here with those fitted. So they, fortunately, are gone. It actually doesn't feel like that big a car. I know it's a very big car, but actually it's very easy to place on the road. You've got a decent view of the bonnet and pretty good visibility all round. That is, again, something that isn't a given with many modern cars, but this one's actually pretty damn good. Fortunately, it would appear that Audi anticipated my concern regarding the spec. Unlike RS products of old, you now have several trim levels to choose from. You've got the base RS6 at 93k, the carbon black at 100, the launch edition we have here at just under 102, or the Vorsprung at 109. The Vorsprung has much of the same equipment as the launch edition: 22-inch wheels, 174 mile an hour limiter, panoramic sunroof, sports exhaust, and some black styling bits, but it also brings some significant upgrades to the party. The air suspension is replaced with a conventional setup featuring a new version of Audi's dynamic ride with cross-link dampers. It actually rides pretty well, but it does lack the adjustable height of the standard air setup. However, this rewards you with an even sharper turn-in. Sadly, the steering is still devoid of feel, whichever suspension you choose to go for. More importantly though, it gives the car everything that I felt ours was lacking: a trick B&O sound system with peekaboo tweeters, which would be £6,300 on their own, a heads-up display, 360-degree parking sensors, and the 3 key packs you can have with this car: Comfort and Sound, City Assist, and Tour. Those give you things like keyless entry, adaptive cruise, and a whole host of active safety features. Frustratingly, one item which is standard on the carbon black, but not the others, is the £2,000 RS interior. That gives you a lot more leather in the cabin and some nice contrast stitching. It genuinely lifts the interior and makes it feel so much more special, and for me that should be standard with the almost £110,000 Vorsprung. The same goes for the Alcantara headlining, which was fitted to one of the cars on test. It's beautiful, but it should be standard and not another £2,000. For me, the Vorsprung is the pick of the range, and Audi agree. They expect 40% of sales to be this top-level car. However, I do say this through gritted teeth. Things like heads-up displays and adaptive cruise were available on cars in this segment as standard a decade and a half ago. In 2020, I'm shocked when I get a Kia press car which doesn't have these, so to have to pay extra for them on a top-of-the-line Audi does sting a bit. The good news is that the Vorsprung models should hold their money well, as they're no doubt going to be the most desirable variant. The only other significant option which you could have with the RS6 is the ceramic brakes. I tried them and they work well, but in all honesty I never felt any problem stopping the car with the gigantic standard items. I'd pocket the 10k, or use it on cosmetic stuff which I think you'll appreciate much more. The engine. Now the engine is what I had a real big worry about, because recent Audis that I've driven have been severely blunted in software. The new S4, the SQ7. The SQ7 in particular, for a 4-litre V8 twin-turbo diesel fitted with special anti-lag technology, is one of the laggiest cars I've ever driven. The previous RS6 was so brilliantly responsive, you'd nearly not know it was a turbocharged engine. The only real giveaway was the fact that it had bags of torque at basically no RPM. The figures on this one surely are good enough. Basically 600 horsepower and 800 newton meters of torque, or about 600 pound-foot or thereabouts. It's just not as sharp as the old car. It just isn't in terms of power delivery. It's got enough torque from low down, about 2,500 RPM, and this thing pulls like a ruddy train, but does take a second or so to kind of get up to speed. Fortunately, unlike some other cars I've driven recently, it's actually pretty good when it comes to pulling out at junctions and so on. There are a lot of cars now which are just too slow to react. You put your foot down and then nothing happens. This one is definitely better in that regard. I've got the car in RS1 mode at the moment, so part of the new RS6, you've got these configurable RS modes, RS1, RS2, obviously aping what BMW do with their M modes. You got a lot of different things that you can configure when you go into the RS mode, including how the Quattro Sport differential behaves. I mean, exactly what you're changing, I don't know, and they don't really tell you, but it's probably making it a more rearward bias. By default, it's a 40-60 front-rear power split with a permanent all-wheel drive system. The car's got 285 section tyres on front and rear, so it's really not short of grip. The one number that did really concern me with this car was the weight figure. This is now a fully paid up member of the 2-ton club. Yeah, it's got the anchors to stop it. Huge, great big 10-piston calipers with 420mm discs. Oh, hello, Jesus. That's exactly what you want to see on the road like this. The car has no problem whatsoever stopping, and the calibration is a lot better than in some other Audi products I've driven, like the R8, which had ceramics and they were far too grabby. This is actually very nice to modulate at whatever speed you're doing, and we've done all the speeds. So we've tested those very thoroughly. What Audi have fitted to this car to counteract that curb weight and make it feel a little bit more agile is a rear steer system. Now, that's a very popular thing to be sticking on cars these days, and nearly everybody seems to have a version of it. In fact, Audi's own stablemate Lamborghini now fit them to the Aventador, and I have to say, it does work. We've driven through a few pretty damn tight roads, and this car feels very lithe. It does not feel like a big 2-ton barge at all. It's quite incredible. For manoeuvring around, just even doing boring stuff, it does really make a big difference and makes this car that much more usable. I have to say as well, we've driven the car, as you've seen, in some fairly hairy conditions, and the Quattro system has really made a difference. I have no doubts whatsoever, if we were here in a rear-wheel drive car with this kind of power, we'd have had quite a few squeaky bum moments. I've currently got the gearbox in its sharpest mode, and it's at low speed where it's just unnecessarily sharp. It's very brutal, and it just doesn't see it does that. It just doesn't need to do that. I know a lot of people would like to have seen a twin clutch fitted to this, and VAG have certainly got one in group because they presumably could have stolen the unit fitted to the Panamera and now the Bentleys, but I don't think it's an awful choice of box, and in its normal comfort mode, actually it's quite good. But overall, the RS6 is a very decent package. The simple fact is, though, that after the best part of 700 odd miles, I just haven't fallen for it. I get it completely and entirely, but the fun has just been taken out of it. That kind of wilder edge that the last car had is just somehow removed. The last one felt connected to the road in a way that very few Audis of the last decade have. This is an extremely competent car, a decent package. It's nice enough. The seats are very comfortable. It's effective. It does what I'm sure most people want from it. I'm sure you can tune it and do silly things, put a crazy exhaust on it, but I just don't love it. I respect it, but I don't love it. As a tool for doing the trip that we've just undertaken, it was a perfect companion. We really could not have asked for better. But would I own one? Not really. If I owned the old RS6, would I change to this? Only if you really couldn't live with the infotainment system in that car, and frankly, I can. However, if you are in the market for a ludicrously fast estate, the new RS6 certainly has a lot going for it. It looks meaner than ever, for better or worse. It is still extremely practical, very comfortable, it's got plenty of tech, and if you spec it nicely, the cabin is a great place to be. Having visited the Audi factory where the cars are built, the emphasis on quality is quite stunning. When these cars are checked during the build process, if any body shell is more than 0.1mm out of order, they simply discard it. Although the engine and gearbox are predictably hampered by the new regulations, it is less of a problem here than in other Audis, and the rear steer system means that this car can be enjoyed on the sort of roads where you would think it would be completely out of its depth. However, the mild hybrid system added to this car, designed exclusively for efficiency gains, really brings nothing to the party, fuel economy figures being no different to the outgoing model. For now, the Audi just about retains its position as class leader in my eyes, but for me the next model needs to have a much better spec as standard and work on trimming its curb weight. Audi were pioneers in the use of aluminium in this segment, but the M5 is some 10% lighter. If BMW were to reintroduce the touring version of that car, I think Audi might have a serious problem. That is my opinion of the RS6. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you for the next one. Auf Wiedersehen!